I'm going to introduce you to our panel of resident experts. How many people have already seen Great Gatsby here? And how many people are coming next weekend? Hopefully see, okay. There may or may not be some spoiler alerts. It's amazing how many people come and say, I've read that book, and then they go, oh, I didn't remember that happened. So, first of all, Ashley Robinson, our director. Zach Urban, who is our dramaturg, who did a lot of the research around this production. Mary Thalasinos, who plays Daisy Buchanan. Chandler Crawford, who plays Jay Gatsby. Cole McCarley, also in from out of town, originally a Spartanburg Little Theatre, Youth Theatre alum, but who arranged and coordinated all the music for this production, which is a huge part of this show, Alt. And then Jacob C., our very own Nick Carraway. So, I'm going to hand it over to our resident expert from Converse University. This is Dr. Erin Templeton. She's a huge Gatsby fan and F. Scott Fitzgerald scholar, among other things. And so I'm just going to hand it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jay. And thank you, everyone, for coming out and spending your Monday evening with us. It's so exciting to see some familiar faces and some new ones, too. As Jay mentioned, I have been a fan of this novel for more than half my life. So my first question for the panel, I know why I'm drawn to The Great Gatsby. Why are you drawn to The Great Gatsby as a work, as a book, as a story? And we'll start with Ashley and maybe hear from the panel.
Why am I drawn to The Great Gatsby? I think it's just so relevant 100 years later in the way it deals with class and sex and money and capitalism and the ravages of capitalism. And that's why, because it's amazing how little has changed. We dress a little different, but that's about it,
Yes to all of what Ashley said. For me, what primarily draws me is the language, the beautiful language of the novel, which can feel a bit histrionic as we experienced in rehearsals. But the beautifully crafted sentences and the way Fitzgerald puts emphasis on certain words, I think this is a particular book where if you eliminated one sentence, the structure would kind of fall apart. Everything perfectly adds up on each other.
For sure.
I've always loved the story. It was one of those books that I read my junior year in high school, and it meant so much to me. And I remember we compared Fitzgerald to Hemingway, and it was just one of the first books where, I don't know, I really fell in love with language and analyzing text. And yes, it's very special to me.
I would have to say that for me, it's such a great character piece. You have a lot of just like really great iconic characters in American literature, and they're all different in their own way, but they're all kind of similar in their own way as well. So when you really just like get into like the meat and bones of the novel, you really like can just dig really, really deep into these people, and just like it just keeps unraveling and unraveling. You can just go so far with it, and I think that's just fascinating.
From a musician standpoint, hi.
You've never talked to the microphone.
I know. From a musician standpoint, I find the plot and the layout of this book to be extremely operatic. And so when Ashley first called me with the idea to do this show as almost like a musical review laid out within the show, as a musician myself, I couldn't think of a better way to kind of revisit this text. Like me and probably everyone else here, I read it in high school. It sat on my shelf collecting dust. I always thought of it very fondly, but I never thought I would touch it again. So this has been an incredible opportunity to revisit these characters. And to me, it taught me a lot about empathy, and it taught me a lot about how to understand the faults of all of these people. Not a single character in this story is perfect. They're all extremely flawed, and almost knowingly so. They're all very deliberate in their mistakes and in their sins that they kind of partake in throughout the entire show. And I don't know of very many books before that did that so directly. Every single person in the show had a vice, And they knew that themselves, and they acted on it so willingly anyway. And it's a delicious subject to tackle from a musical standpoint. You can make it very nasty, you can make it very beautiful and glamorous, and either way, it's fun.
What always fascinates me about The Great Gatsby every time I read it is I remember how realistic it is, and that's kind of contradictory, I feel like, because this novel is so over the top, the show is over the top at times, the movies have been over the top at times, but it's so realistic in the fact that some of the most sad people in the world are the ones that have it all, and I think you see that so well in The Great Gatsby, and it kind of just proves that no matter how much you accomplish or how much money you collect or how much status you receive, there's always going to be some highlight in the past that you find more interesting, and it's just so incredibly sad. And yeah,
like the green light we talked about being that, like the final monologue as we have it. You know, he talks about the green light always being this thing at the end of the year. It's always in the distance, and that's like the capitalism thing I was saying. It's like I've heard a person refer to like money or sex or power as the hungry ghost, right? You can never actually get it full. You can never actually feed these things. And so the green light at the end, what's the line about tomorrow we will...
Tomorrow we will run faster, we will stretch out our arms farther, and one fine morning.
And then it's nothing. And then it's one fine morning, nothing. Because we never get it. Yeah.
So you mentioned the movies. A couple of you mentioned the movies. Opinions?
I don't, like, even after the novel, and I love the 70s film, but I don't understand, I cannot follow the Baz Luhrmann movie. Literally, it's so style over substance that, like, I don't know what's going on at any point.
Disclaimer, I love the movies. There are 3 of them. The Robert Redford one from the 70s, directed by Scorsese. The 2013 one, Baz Luhrmann with DiCaprio. And a little-known A&E made-for-television one from the year 2000 with Mira Sorvino as Daisy and Paul Rudd as our friend Nick Carraway.
Wow. Really?
Yep. Yep.
Do you have a favorite of the 3?
You know, I like them all in different ways. Probably, if I had to choose one, I would go with the most recent. That's my favorite, except for the frame, the Minnesota parts in the wintertime, because it's making an argument that Scott Fitzgerald and Nick Carraway are the same person.
Oh, I see.
And they're not. They have things in common. But so do Gatsby, and so do some of these other characters. And so that part of the film collapses. And that, as a literary scholar, is a pet peeve of mine. Yes?
Yes, I have many conflicting feelings about the Baz Luhrmann movie, but if we were to talk about it, we'd be here a while. The one thing I can't stand that it does, it cuts one of my favorite lines, her voice is full of money.
That is in a deleted scene. Have you seen the deleted?
It is. They've filmed it, but they took it out because it takes that moment away of the build-up and the suspense for Gatsby trying to get Daisy from Tom. Because then it sounds like, oh, he's defeated already.
Yep.
And in our play, it keeps that line, but it cuts a really great scene in the book where it's Gatsby and Nick talking after the party, and Gatsby talks about Daisy didn't like the party. And then Nick's like, what, she not like the dance? And he's like, well, sport, that dance is not important. And so it's a wonderful scene, and sadly it's cut from the play. Probably for the same exact reason.
Well, you just can't do it all, right? I mean, like, you have to pick and choose. I did really like, coming back to the music, the soundtrack of that original one. And so let's flip it to the music of this one, because one of the things that I think is really amazing about this production is that, and if you haven't seen it, you have a treat coming your way. Live music with Simone Mack singing at various points throughout, and she is phenomenal. So talk to us a little bit about how you chose the songs and what you were after there.
So I would say probably once everything was said and done, about half of the musical choices were mine and the other half were Ashley's, but it was really his concept that he came to me with, deciding to kind of inlay music into the play. The big conversation kind of revolved around, I remember at the beginning, Creep, which...
So good, by
yeah,
the way.
it comes back, and it's very cinematic in a way. It comes back in various guises throughout the show, and if you're careful, you can listen for it. She's not necessarily always singing it. It's in the instrumentation, kind of backtracking a lot of the different action that's happening on stage. But learning how to... I mean, it's a soundtrack. It's learning how to chronicle the journey of any particular character, musically speaking. And so it was extremely tempting to do this on a larger scale within the show. And I mean, the whole thing was taking music that anybody recognized within 100 years. Anything within 100 years was fair game, is what we decided. So I mean, we've got Miley Cyrus in here, but we've also got Jimmy Buffett, we've got Radiohead, of course, the Beatles. We go all over the place.
Lady Gaga.
Lady Gaga, shall we forget? No.
And it's all in the style
of the 20s.
Of like standards,
Yes.
like Cole Porter.
And that was the biggest challenge of all, is you want it to sound familiar. You want people to be able to, you know, my grandma said she sat next to this couple when she came to see it on Saturday. They just kept smacking each other's legs whenever they recognize a song. And it's like, yes, that's exactly what you want. You want to keep them on their toes the entire time. And, you know, me and Ashley have been sitting with this music, for the whole cast has, for, you know, a month. It kind of lost its vivacity in a way and its surprise, but it's really fun to get it in front of an audience and for it to genuinely surprise people. So, you know, the trick was making it sound familiar so that people would grasp onto it immediately, but to also try to say something new and fresh. Thankfully, we were not the first people to try to do this. You know, we have Postmodern Jukebox to thank, which is a fantastic kind of group of instrumentalists and arrangers and singers that already kind of take music like this and put it in this style. So I had a great kind of foundation for that. But it was, we'll just go to the green light really quick. I really wanted to find something that could glue everything together, not just in style, but a single like musical idea. So the only real thing that I truly composed from scratch for this production was like a green light chord, which I tried to stick everywhere I possibly could, especially where the green light was extremely relevant. So it's the tag of a bunch of different songs, or it's just inlaid within, and can I just play the chord for you now? So it's one major chord in the left hand, and another major chord in the right hand. There's something kind of happy, there's something kind of sad, there's something kind of jazzy about it. You can literally stick it anywhere, and that's what I wanted more than anything. And so that was my one thing that I wanted to do with this show, as I was thinking, how in the world can I glue all these together in a way that is my own, that will make it instantly recognizable to everybody. It couldn't be a melody, it needed to be something harmonic, something that I could underpin under everything. And so that was the biggest challenge and the most fun, and I think gratifying. I think it ended up working out.
I think it worked out. Yes.
Yes.
He's always doing that to me. He's always, I'm like, oh my God, that was so wonderful, Holt. And he's like, was it really good? He always needs a second, third, fourth compliment.
It's really good. And one of the things that I love the most about the Radiohead is that it really sort of underlines, I think, a common misconception or something that we often overlook with Gatsby, which is that he is kind of stalker.
Yeah, he's kind of creepy. Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, he is sort of keeping track of this woman for 5 years and cutting out all the things in the newspaper and, you know, following her step by step by step, buying a house across the bay so that he can look out. You know, I mean, there's a way in which, you know, we think of that as like quintessentially romantic, but it's also kind of creepy.
It is.
Especially in 2022, it's kind of disconcerting. And so I love that that's sort of a subtle underpinning.
Right, yeah, and that was the big thing that Ashley and I talked about. We wanted music that didn't just paint the glamour of this era. We wanted things that would expose the seedy underbelly of these characters. And I feel like we chose songs that really did that in musical ways, in lyrical ways, and hopefully it was evocative enough to get the job done.
So for our cast members, favorite line from your character?
Zach should go first. he took a piece of chicken, and that was a really meaningful moment.
Jay.
I can talk about my characters if we want to circle back.
Okay. What about you, Gatsby?
Okay.
Okay.
My favorite line that Daisy says is that you're so cool. And I love that because in the book, she's telling him that she loves him. And I remember the first time I read the book, that just blew my mind, the audacity that she has to do this in front of Tom and everyone else. And it's so lovely, you know? So that's definitely my favorite line. She has some good stuff, but
Well, how it plays against like the heat of the moment.
Yes.
I think is what's so cool is you're in the hottest time of summer and you're like, you above all else, you're so cool.
I actually have not even thought about this at all. I mostly think about the lines that I hate the most. But I do actually really like "Her voice is full of money." I think that's a really, really great line. I think it says a lot about like Gatsby's like continuous like inner monologue and like what he actually thinks about Daisy. And I don't know. There's a lot to it, and it's not like an easy thing to like unravel necessarily. But I do think there's like a before and after that line for him. Like he says it, and then like kind of that is like a push button, like a play forward. Like let's go. Like now let's get the ball rolling. I need to seal this deal, kind of thing. At least that's how I interpret it for me in the play. So that I would probably say that's my favorite line.
I'm going to preface this with a warning for all of you coming this coming weekend. Please turn your cell phones off. And I say that because this line ended up having two meanings on Saturday night, and it is now absolutely my favorite line. The last words that Nick says to Gatsby in the book are, he's reassuring him and he's telling him they're a rotten crowd, talking about Daisy, Tom, and all of them. You're worth the whole damn bunch put together. Well, the other night we had a cell phone go off with a funky disco ringtone. And it wasn't a quick one, it was about 30 seconds.
I was sitting up here and I just watched them take it out and not bother to even read it.
It went on, they were like right there.
And so, I didn't really even realize it when I said it, but I kind of motioned here and I'm like, they're a rotten crowd, Jay. And afterwards, I go backstage and everyone's dying laughing. Like, what's so funny? He said, you called them a rotten. And I'm like, oh, that's true. But no, aside from that, it really is one of my favorite lines because one of the things we don't get to incorporate in the play version as much as I would love to is Gatsby's similarity to F. Scott Fitzgerald in that they're both outsiders. And Fitzgerald, even when he became a successful writer and accumulated a lot of money, he still felt like on the outside of this upper class, like just something that he could not, these kinds of people that he could not penetrate. He could not get into that class. And that's what Gatsby feels too. And there's a couple of really great scenes in the book that shows how sad Gatsby is, that how much he tries to get into this elite status. And although he has just as big of a house as the Buchanans, probably, I don't know, and throws all these fancy parties, he'll never be one of them. And that final line that Nick gives him, that final thing he says to him is like, basically like, why would you want to be like them? They're a rotten crowd. You're worth, no matter what you think, no matter how much money you have or they have, you're worth the whole damn bunch put together. And that line always makes me choke up a little bit because it's a beautiful scene, especially when there's no cell phones involved.
No, that's so true. There's a scene in the book where they go to Gatsby's house and Tom and Daisy and Jordan, like they're all on horseback. And Gatsby goes inside to change so that they can go to dinner, and while he's inside, everybody leaves him. And he's left at home by himself, and he comes back out, and they're all gone except for Nick. And it's like, what happened? And it's this heartbreaking moment where you see he's striving so hard, and he wants to be accepted, and he thinks that he's going to be, and then they're just sort of playing him. And as soon as they get the chance, they leave.
Yeah, he even apologizes for not having a horse. He's like, I'll just have to take my car, but give me one moment, I'll be along. And then, yeah, there's just nothing there.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. Did we get all the lines?
I want to know Ashley's.
Yeah,
What's your favorite line?
My favorite line of the show?
Yeah.
Hold your mic up.
or the book. Both.
I think it honestly, it's sorry, I didn't turn it on. I think it's honestly the one that we just had Nick say.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Easy out, but
About
exception.
running forward, running, you know,
Oh, that
about
one.
running
Yeah, let's
faster, reaching farther,
Mhm.
and then one fine morning.
Nothing.
And in the book, it's just an ellipse. Not an ellipse, it's a dash.
Extra long dash.
Extra long dash.
Mm.
Like a doc
Yeah.
that I read in that book you gave me.
Oh.
So it's almost like the end of a doc. It was like a, what did they call
They
it?
said it might have been the first example of a graphic
Graphic
novel
novel.
image appearing in a book.
Which book is this?
Oh, the end of The Great Gatsby.
No, the book that you're talking
Oh,
about.
it's called So We Read On.
Okay, yeah.
By how the Great Gatsby came to be and why it endures.
Yes.
Highly recommend that book if you guys are fans of the Great Gatsby.
So we've talked about the music, we've talked about your character's favorite line. Let's talk about the staging. Because there are some things that are pretty difficult to stage in this play.
Yes.
An airplane, a car crash, cars in general, polo fields, Long Island Sound. So talk to us a little bit about the decisions that you made to bring the place to life.
I read the adaptation, and Jay and I met at the coffee shop downtown. And I literally, I sat there and, I read the play that day, and I just sketched. I was like, how do we keep it flowing? Because there were so many small scenes, and they've got to keep flowing, and they've got to keep... And I just kind of drew this on a napkin, didn't I, Jay? I was like beautiful Edison bulbs, and a rake stage, so we don't have to stage everyone in a straight line all the time, and we can really see dimension and depth, and have everyone and sort of skeletal furniture to represent, and the lights can represent things flying in, and that way we could just keep everything moving and flowing, and the music helped with that too, because we could do just really interesting transitions that kept the storytelling going as well. I don't know, does that answer your question?
Sort of. I mean, what about some of you guys who are on the stage while this is happening? Do you want to talk about what it's like to be in a plane, maybe, or in a car, but not actually?
That was fun. The plane in particular was a fun time because one of the original, going back to the music, one of the original concepts that Ashley had was he wanted to create the sound of the plane with the band. And so there is this kind of shoestring theater quality to this show where he, like you said, skeletal furniture.
It's very theatrical. I
Yeah.
wanted to create a piece where you literally see the strings, like a puppet show. You see the strings, so it is theater. You know what I mean?
Which is so contrary to what Gatsby is, But as a show, I mean, you can do this show extremely dolled up, as glamorous as you can possibly want, but to really strip it away, I think that takes artistic bravery, and for it to still work, so I think it did.
Yeah, I think one thing we really should touch on is just the amount of transition work that we did. And once we finally got them kind of down by opening night, I think they really add a lot to the story and a lot to the show overall because, a lot like the music, the transitions also become their own characters, so to speak. You just have all these moving parts and everything's coming in and out really fast and clean. And how do you bring on a plane on stage while, getting two dudes out of their tuxedos and into bomber jackets? And how do you make a car appear on stage and headlights pop out? It's just incredibly impressive. And the fact that I think we were able to make it work at all is, I think it's just a testament to the entire cast, hard work, and Ashley's direction and everything. So I think, all of it just kind of comes together as its own piece.
It totally does, and I mean, the music is a big part of this, as you say. There's never a moment until intermission where you're just sitting in the audience waiting for something to happen. There's always something to look at, there's always something to listen to. Even the scene changes are part of the show. And they're so smooth and they're so visually interesting.
There's only one blackout in the entire show.
Yeah.
One blackout.
It's a very important moment. But I think that's interesting talking about the transitions really quick. I feel like that was one of the real moments that Ashley was able to say things outside of the bounds of the script. It was when he was really able to make his own mark on the piece, because it was the stuff that was said between the lines. And those are the moments that unfortunately I haven't seen from the get-go. I don't know. I know that they lift a cloth at some point during a cymbal roll. I know that they, I know there's a lot of motion happening, but that was one of the most notable moments that my grandmother told me when she came to see this past weekend. There's a moment during Creep that I didn't know happened, where like Tom apparently lifts you, almost like a puppet, and like controls you. I didn't know that happened. But those are the moments that were just not at all written into the script. Ashley said, how can I interpret this? How can we make this our own? So it's a beautiful merriment of music and theater and choreography all together.
I remember when I think maybe we discussed just the show and like some things that were going to happen, movement came up and how important movement was going to be in this show. And it's one of my favorite things that I got to study is movement in theater. And just like going back to this moment, you have dancing, these intricate transitions where, sometimes, it's not sometimes, it's always, the movement is so intentional. However a character is moving a piece across the stage or moving just off stage altogether, it's very intentional. And, but I think one of my favorite things that we've done with this stage and this setup is that, when we're at the Buchanan home, out there is, Gatsby, that's where all of that is, and yet in Gatsby, when we are in his home, we got that green light on the other side, so we're literally turning everything around, and I think it's so lovely, especially when you're off stage and you're watching that green light just pulse occasionally. It's really lovely what we've done.
I mean, you could spend a lot of money on props and on set design. And, assuming that we had unlimited resources, and you see the way that the film versions do this, right? Like the Scorsese version and the Lerman, both in their own way, like the budgets for those films must have been astronomical. Like on set, on location, not even talking about actors and costumes and that whole business, but just the physical setting of the, and this is it, right? And it becomes New York City, and it becomes Long Island Sound, and it becomes a speakeasy at one point. It becomes, the highway in between New York City and Long Island Sound. It's a really amazing use of space to transform into so many different places with so many different vibes. So that's something else to look forward to if you have not yet seen it.
Also, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to our ensemble. They are amazing.
Yes.
One of the cool things about the show is that hardly any of us ever really leave the stage. We're always either on stage or on these platforms over here. So everyone pretty much stays in character the whole 2 hours or however long the show is. And that's incredibly demanding. I feel like it's easy for me since as the narrator, I just kind of get moved around and I just am always in the action. But for everyone who has to just sit down and not be in a scene but still remain in character and remain in the mood, I feel like it's extremely challenging, and our ensemble has been amazing and the transitions are beautiful. So yeah, I wanted to give a quick shout out to them.
Yeah.
Well, I'm bouncing off of that. Last night, or after our show yesterday, we were kind of talking about how spectacular it is to sit in the balcony and watch this show, and I sort of just made a joke like, oh, they're the eyes of God, but in a way they truly are. And I think also, when people are sitting off stage and just observing, it's sort of like that too, because if you've seen the show, you know that we use the eyes of Eckelberg in a different way, and that they actually don't play as large a role in this show as they do in the book, but I think we still have kind of made use of them. Yes, they're still there.
When it matters, they're there.
To carry off of that, there's a realization I've come to about the book by playing servant characters.
Yes, Zach is one of the ensemble members who does everything in this show, all the transitions, and he always had amazing ideas. Sorry, my mic's not on. But he always had amazing ideas for what to do in these transitions, and he was so collaborative with you. And besides being the dramaturg, like you were just so like, yeah, I'll do that. Oh, can I do that? And you never got to say your favorite line because you were going to talk about your different characters. So Yeah, do that.
Yeah, I don't really know what my favorite line is, but I was going to make a point about a realization I had about the novel through playing with servant characters. And it's particularly the scene where Daisy has her heart-to-heart with Nick, and it's just Elizabeth and I standing in the background there. And it's this idea, I think it's something Fitzgerald was getting at, and it's something he experienced in his life, being just on the outside of being upper class his entire life. It's that in America, we aren't like Downton Abbey. We aren't born with lords and ladies, so we don't have a royal family. Supposedly, all you need is money and merit to move up. But I think characters like Tom Buchanan, portrayed by Brad brilliantly, I think Tom Buchanan is kind of the key to understanding how Fitzgerald feels about this idea of the rich being different people, and not exactly different in the terms of, oh, they spend their money foolishly, they buy hydroplanes, and then they throw these parties, but it's Tom is wildly overconfident, and you wonder where he gets this from, but it's this entitlement that he has. He's comfortable in his privilege, and there's this notion that the people, I mean, isn't that weird that you're sitting around in a house with servants everywhere, listening to your conversations, your private moments, your arguments, and then you just snap at them when you want them to do something. So there is a class system, at least suggested by Gatsby.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
very fascinating.
I mean, one of the things that he talks about in his letters, he was very influenced by Edith Wharton, who was born Edith Jones. If you've heard the phrase, keeping up with the Joneses, she's one of those Joneses. So America doesn't have like the hereditary line, as you say, that the UK does. But there is a sense of aristocracy that is so perfectly embodied by Tom Buchanan and Daisy to a certain extent too, that Gatsby just is on the outside of, as you guys have so well noted already. Like, he has the money, but he doesn't have the knowledge, right? Like, he doesn't know the rules, he doesn't know the etiquette, he doesn't know how to behave. He thinks that if you just, if you make enough money, then you'll get into the club. And one of the most heartbreaking things about it is that he's just wrong about that in this story. And one of the things, we get the scene outside of their house, the conversation between Nick and Gatsby, as they're looking in, and the observation that they're just careless people, right? And that they smash things up and they go on with their lives and they don't care, there's no consequence for them, which is true. Like, they can just go off and move to Chicago or travel to Paris or go wherever their money takes them. Whereas, Gatsby could do that, but he has strings attached to him. He's got these business deals, he's got these connections. And so, one of the things that I think, and we do have a couple of cast members in the audience, so kudos to Myra Wolfsheim and Tom Buchanan, who I see both out there.
And our stage manager, E-Man. Makes this whole thing go.
But these are two of the more colorful characters in the story, in the play, in the films. I think Tom is usually the one who's most miscast, but not in your production. Not in your production. So great. And you mentioned a little bit about what you learned about servants in playing your character. That is like the perfect lead into my next question, which is for the rest of the cast. Like, what did you learn about your character, or about the book more generally, through embodying Daisy or Jay Gatsby or Nick Carraway?
Well, one of the things that I was always taught is you never hate your character. Don't do that when you're going to play a character. And everyone I talk to, specifically about Daisy, says that they hate her. And I think, I don't know, there is something to love about Daisy, and I do love how complicated she is, and there's so many things that you could talk about when it comes to her. But I think something that has made me feel very, very good is that people say, I hate her, and yet I loved her when I was watching B Daisy. And I think that it's true. Like, people hate her for what she does. They hate her for, I mean, yeah, she just abandons Gatsby, and she doesn't care about what happened, and she just moves on because she can. And it is easy to hate her. Every time that he has his monologue that says that she doesn't leave anything, there's nothing. She just leaves, and her last line to Nick in the New York scene, it's just, it's heartbreaking. It does make you angry. But there's a lot to love about her too, and I learned that.
Well, she's put in such a hard position, right?
She
Like,
is.
tell him you've never loved him.
Yes, and she wants to go. She comes to him ready to go, and he doesn't. He won't let her. He says, no, you've got to go.
It's all or nothing, right?
Yes.
And she won't, and she's very forthright. Like, I can't say that. That wasn't true. I don't love him. Like, I love you now. Why isn't that enough?
Yeah.
And for him, it's not, because this is, of course, you can erase the past. Yeah, of course you can. Or not.
Are you running this too?
Nobody else
How about
is
you,
answering.
Nick?
Nobody else is answering.
I absolutely love Nick Carraway, and I'm so honored to play him every night, seriously. So thank you, Ashley, for casting me. It's an honor. No, seriously though, when I was doing research on, just kind of what literary scholars, how they interpret Nick, everyone has such strong opinions of him. They either hate him, which I don't get, or they really love him. And I don't get all the strong opinions. I think he's hilarious, and it's not, and the humor is not in this particular script is not put into focus as much. I think in the book he has some of the most hilarious little observations, especially like about Tom. I don't know. I crack up every time I read it. So yeah, that was one of the things I wanted to do, is kind of show the humor in his. This man goes from being a kid in a candy shop, because similar to Fitzgerald, he's middle class, but he's not Buchanan rich, and he gets there in the summer of 22, and it is literally like a theme park for him. He's going to these parties, he's being pulled to these wild apartment shindigs, and it's kind of fun, and he gets wrapped up in it. I feel like most 20-something-year-olds would, who just spent the last few years in a war. So yeah, he wants to have a good time. But I love playing that switch into just the kind of his realization that this is kind of a messed up situation, and all of these people are phony and just mean to one another, and just to watch him suddenly realize these things slowly throughout the story is just, it's so fun to play, and it's so fun to kind of mess with that tension and show that tension. And I hope I showed that well to the audience. So it's not just, yeah, I'm having fun, to I hate all these people. It's so much in between. And he sympathizes with every character, at least a little bit. Even Tom, he really does feel for him, and he understands that there are certain things that these characters, they just cannot understand because of either where they came from or just the privilege they have, and they just cannot wrap their mind around being selfless for other people. So yeah, it's a really fun character to play.
He gets Tom because he spent 4 years at Yale with Tom, right? And so he's been around those kind of guys for a while, and he understands where they're coming from, and he understands their limitations in a way that Gatsby, who hasn't had that experience, can't, right? But one of the things, and I think probably my favorite line that isn't in the play is Jordan telling Nick that she finally met another bad driver. Which, there's a great scene that, where they're talking about the driving.
We cut it for time.
Bring it back, Ashley.
Well, if they would sharpen up these damn bosses.
But we do, there is the open, the earlier scene about it, where Jordan talks about the driving. But Nick's relationship with Jordan, and you see him turn on her, right, when he learns about her golf game. But yeah, the rest of it, the way he sort of slowly comes to recognize these things, and his moment of like, oh, it's my birthday. Just like, you know, it's perfect, just right on point there.
And speaking of that Jordan scene, I love that towards the end of the play/book, Nick gives almost every character a chance to tell the truth. And when he asks Jordan about her tournament, I don't want to assume, but I like to believe that if she would have just told him the truth, that they maybe could have moved on and kind of salvaged whatever relationship, friendship they have. But she won't do it. She will not fess up. And then he goes and he kind of offers Gatsby a chance, or rather, Gatsby just comes out and tells him the truth. And that's also one of my favorite lines, and it's 2 words, and it's just when Nick kind of takes a pause, and in my interpretation, he takes a pause and he looks at Gatsby after Gatsby's told him his real life story, and he just says, "Thank you." And it's just that moment of realization that, you know, that they really are friends now. True friends, not just phony, I'm friends with you because you're Daisy's cousin. You know, this is real life. I'm the one person that you chose to tell this story to. And it's all about truth for Nick. At the very end, it's all about truth. And Daisy even has a chance, like the line you're talking about, "You're always my favorite cousin, Nick." That's her chance to tell Tom possibly the truth about who was driving that night, but instead she says, "You're always my favorite cousin, Nick," and it salvages it cuts the relationship right there. So each character kind of gets a chance, and it's just what they do with it is what makes them in Nick's eyes.
Jay, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Jay doesn't really have anything to do with the story, so we can just no, it's really interesting that that Nick, I think, is so drawn to Jay, because I mean all these people like live like lives just full of lies, and I think Jay, in a way, like I think this is also like why he's also so attracted to Daisy, is because I think they both are just constantly like lying to themselves. And he's probably the biggest phony of all of them, but he does kind of like redeem himself a little bit by telling Nick the truth and just kind of coming clean. But I think that also like that's at the end, like he knows he's at the end of his rope, it's all over for him. And I think he realizes that if he doesn't, you know, have some kind of connection with somebody at the end of it, then he's just gonna die miserable. I think he probably knows that. So, yeah, it's really interesting for me coming at it from my perspective. I'm just like Gatsby. Like, I'm really, really cool, and I drive a really cool car. So, no, I'm just kidding. I do not. But no, it was really difficult for me because he is so like opposite, and he's so mysterious, and that's just like inherent in his character. Because he just constantly is trying to fool people around him, fool himself, while he's obsessing about this person, and it is so unhealthy for him, and you can like tell that just like tearing him apart. But he's like obsessed, and he's like, I have to get this one thing to complete everything, and then once I have the final piece, which is Daisy, then I can finally be happy. I can finally live my life and be happy with this person. Which actually brings me back to like one of my favorite lines that I didn't even mention before is towards the end, he talks about how he has this pool and he hasn't used it all summer, even though he's been throwing all these parties and he's been living in this house for 5 years. He's like, I've never used this pool all summer, and I think that kind of speaks volumes to how he has just lived his life. Like, he has spent all of this money for what? He doesn't use it doesn't enjoy it. Like, he's just doing it for one reason only, and then
it's all for show, right?
Yeah, it's all for show.
There's no pleasure that he gets from any of it. It's funny because he has these moments of honesty that we don't recognize necessarily. Like, he tells Nick, I was in the war. which is true. Like he tells Nick that he was at Oxford, which is also true. But he, like the thing that's so interesting about Gatsby is that he will sort of dangle these little fish, like bits of fish food, these little breadcrumbs, and they're honest, but there's a lot more to the story that he leaves out deliberately so.
Right.
And so, he doesn't ever out and out lie, but he lies by omission at various points throughout. And for Nick, at the beginning of the book, of the play, like, I'm one of the only honest men I've ever known. And you have that moment where you're talking about how you reserve judgment, and so this leads people to tell you things. And then we see that play out so beautifully, both on the page and on the stage. I think that's about it for my questions, and I think we have about 10 minutes left or so. Are there questions from the audience members in the back?
Hi. I saw the play on Friday night and sat up in the balcony and didn't realize until I came in today how slanted and steep the stage was. Were there any specific challenges other than just your normal balance that the incline presented when blocking things?
The drink cart.
The drink cart, the wardrobe, the dancing.
Try sitting back.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was
Existing.
honestly.
What are some of the lessons learned and how are those overcome and accomplished?
Move very carefully.
I really like the idea of it being on a raised platform because you have this idea of upward momentum through the play where everyone is trying to get up there. So this idea of us being juxtaposed on this stage where everything is tilted and you have to make more of an effort to get further up there. I think that speaks to what the characters in the novel and what Fitzgerald was experiencing in his life. And there's water imagery everywhere, and many scholars have said that Fitzgerald was so inspired by water. He lived really close to water everywhere he was. The Riviera, the lake in Minnesota, on Long Island Sound. There's this idea that his characters are all like swimmers trying not to drown. We spoke about that early in our process. He has a short story called The Swimmers.
The Swimmers, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I put a lot of thought into what he just said. Really, I just wanted the blood to run down at a certain pace, so that's all.
And it does.
I have a question.
Yes.
To Dr. Templeton.
Yes.
At the end of the book, do you think Tom knows who was driving?
No. I think Tom is very committed to his worldview. And I think Tom is very committed to his idea of Daisy. And I don't think that includes a lot of agency on her part.
Then can I ask you a question? Sure. What do you think that they're talking about when Nick sees them sitting, or maybe it's Jordan who sees them, they're sitting at the table, the kitchen table that night, and then I think they're holding hands.
They're eating fried chicken in the book. It's cold fried chicken.
What do you think they're discussing?
What's next, right? Like they're planning their getaway.
Right, but you don't think that,
I mean, she knows that Myrtle is, I don't think that she knows that she ran Myrtle over. Sorry, spoiler alert. But I don't think that she knows that that's who Myrtle was. But she knows that Tom has had other women, and now this is the first time that she's had another man. And so I think that they are reconciling after both having their separate, they're coming back together as a couple, as superficial as that couplehood might be. But I don't think that I don't think that she's confessing to him what has happened. And I think even if she would have tried, Tom is not the most open-minded of men. He's very committed to his opinions. And I don't think that a woman would be very likely to sway those. That's my 2 cents anyways. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Some comment for the director and the men in the show. This was probably the first time that I got to see how we each noticed it before, so it was and I teach the book. I've seen all of these. I've never seen it as a play, and seeing it as a play with real people in front of you, and a living, breathing thing, it's just, it gave another appeal from the onion. And
Well, it's just
very
society at
grateful
the
for that.
time. I mean, she's got that beautiful monologue about when she knew she was having a girl, and
Oh, yeah.
she wept,
Of course.
and she said the best thing that a woman can be in this world is a fool.
Yeah.
You know,
Beautiful little fool.
to navigate the world. You know, because that's all the agency they have.
And Daisy didn't really come to being married in the 20s with all that money was not necessarily, even if she left, I don't know that she would have survived.
I don't think she was ever going to leave.
No.
She's so comfortable. She
She
can.
was the best heroine ever. I said, yes, I love Gatsby and Dallas together. They're all holding the rest. I don't even think it's real original dreams either. She's more sympathetic. Actually being married, when you become married, you see different things too. As a junior in high school, I did not even get the novel. But it's one of my favorite ones now. It's one of my favorites. And, y'all did a great job. Really.
Thank you.
You know that line that you mentioned actually, well, allegedly Zelda Fitzgerald said that when their daughter was born. Allegedly.
Stolen.
He did that.
It's in that book.
He did that. And she was fine with that until she wasn't.
Yeah, right. To her book.
Until she wasn't.
Yeah.
About 1929. Somebody was going to say something and I cut you off.
Oh, I was just going to say, she's also quoted at the beginning of our script as saying, it's not exact, but she says something about how nice it was a long time ago. Things were warm.
That's
Or is
in the
it
play, it's
always-
what you say.
Yes, yes, but there's a quote in the beginning.
From one of her letters.
Mhm.
Her letters are beautiful. I mean, she's quite a writer herself. Although never published one novel, a couple of short stories, a couple of articles, some of them under his name because it paid better. I mean, he made a lot of money writing short stories. And they always, I mean, he made a lot of money, but he spent even more. So they always needed money. Other questions? If you have not yet seen the show, I think that tickets are going very quickly. There's been a new performance added Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock. It's Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday afternoon, and Saturday afternoon now.
One thing I wanted to add, I just wanted to give a big shout out to our design team and staff. When you have someone come in who's as accomplished and has so much vision like Ashley, it really does give you new challenges. And when someone says, "I need a car," how does this pop up out of the set? Or I need a big painting in the back, or I need blood. Ashley and I made a famous devil's pact. I wanted costumes and he wanted blood, and I promised him almost reneged on that foolishly, but he got me in the end. But all of those things, and we have this amazing scenic painter, Catherine Roush, who literally painted every inch of this set, the marble floor and this background. It really puts you in the area, and our lighting designer, Peter. So a big shout out to them for making this vision also happen. But thank you, Erin. Thank you, Ashley, Holt, and the rest of the cast, and thank you all for being here. Thank you to Hub City Bookshop, who has brought along some beautiful copies of The Great Gatsby. If you do not have one yet, go check them out at the table in the lobby and purchase one, please.
They're really cool.
They are really cool. There's a
It's really cool.
Yeah, really beautiful. And Ashley is off. We're sad to see him go, but thank you, Ashley, for what you brought to SLT. And thank you so much. We hope to see you this weekend